All righty. Well, first and foremost, obviously, the top of everyone's mind is Corona. Uh, so, what advice? Oh, sorry, I guess I'd introduce him, but I don't think I need to. This is Tom Brands. He's the head coach of Iowa. Um, so,
Go
uh,
Hawks.
what advice would you give wrestlers right now as far as training or getting better at wrestling since we can't actually get on the wrestling mat?
I think because, and you're absolutely correct, and then take that one step further where we don't even know when our next competition is going to be, and that's internationally, college, high school. I mean, not saying that those seasons aren't going to go, but like the international calendar, I mean, they got a tentative date for a international tournament in Kiev and a tentative date for Minsk, and that's it. And those are tentative. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And so it's time, and this is where like smart coaches obviously know this, but you know, the phase is the lowest peaking phase of the year. And that's important because you're not necessarily in this mode where you're just in a kind of a, like where you can't get out of it, where you're just doing the same things over and over again. Lifting weight, running. Oh my gosh, I'm so bored. What do I got to do? Get in your manual, get in the written word, meditate, self-reflect, be critical. It's very difficult to be critical. We can be on the phone now. Get on the phone with your coaches. You know, if you're a really good wrestler, people tell you how great you are and they gravitate to you. Find somebody that's going to talk to you about what you need to do to really get to the next level. Hard to do. So it's not just about running and lifting and stance and motion. It is about those things, but not just about those things. It has to be emotional, mental, spiritual. It has to be video oriented. And I'm kind of lecturing right now. Don't really like lecturing. But the enlightening thing for me is when you see like our guys, when they get outside their comfort zone. And I'm not just talking about, you know, it's not a 15-minute trot. You know, it's a hard run with some hills at the end and some, you know, pull-ups on a tree limb, you know, or whatever. And then you take care of your schoolwork because we're still in school. We got 9 guys that are graduating in May. And then our other guys got to continue and they got to finish up the semester. So, and then you get in the written word, you get in your mental toughness routine. And that's where the difference is going to be.
Speaking about mental toughness and also, you know, wrestlers' emotions, this is probably kind of a hard topic, but how did you handle when you had to tell your team that there was no NCAAs? Because this was like definitely a Hawkeyes year, you know, it was probably a tough situation. So how did you prepare yourself for that?
As a coaching staff, we knew the announcement was coming. I think our guys probably knew too, but we were in a workout and I just kept waiting for our director of ops, Mariah Marinelli, to walk in with the official announcement. And it wasn't even the NCAA announcement. It was a Big Ten announcement that all Big Ten institutions were going to be suspending postseason competition starting right now. You know, not the spring sports, but the winter sports. And we were a week out. It was actually 1 week exactly out. It was a Thursday. And you deal with it ahead of time. You deal with it in the recruiting process. When there's unknowns, we didn't know COVID-19 was going to go down like this. And you deal with the uncertainty because we control the things that we can control. And the things that we can't control, we're not a victim. We immediately shift gears into problem solving mode. The problem is there's a lot of uncertainty in this when you're talking about the next steps. And so what are the next steps? And that's why I talk about the things that it won't become mundane. That's why I emphasize the written word and the mental toughness routines and those types of things and the self-assessments, because it's tough to assess yourself. But you can really, really grow. And sometimes, you know, like we had some guys that had some really good years for us that were going to go right into international competition. So they're still going to be at the highest peak. So say Spencer Lee and Cassiope both win a national title this year. You know, they're both two guys that you look at that would have, you know, Spencer Lee had already qualified for the trials, but, you know, a national champion at the NCAA Division I level gets into the trials. So you just keep going, and then it's a day-to-day thing where you're in that high peak phase. And a lot of times you don't get the luxury, and I say luxury, of having that time to reflect and self-evaluate. So we dealt with that way ahead of time. These guys were told some news that was a crisis. It was dramatic. We will control the things that we can control. We don't know the next steps, but I can tell you right now that we're going to work hard on those next steps as they come up and as they become clearer. And right now, the next step is you know, every day you got to get better and you got to stretch. And let's get this football season off. I mean, let's get rid of COVID-19 so we can have this football season, because that's on everybody's minds.
Yeah. You kind of segued into what I want to talk about next, which is the Olympics get pushed back a year. Obviously, you're training guys who are aiming at that. So there's kind of like a cycle of training that you're scheduled for. So how does that adjust, adding a whole nother year to the cycle, especially maybe for like older guys, not even as much for the college guys?
It adjusts because you have perspective, and it adjusts because you are forward thinking. So a great example of what you're talking about is Sam Brooks. After the Olympics, Sam Brooks was looking to move on. And that's assuming he made the team. Wasn't even a doubt in his mind that he was going to he's going to wrestle in the 2020 Olympics in 2021. As a matter of fact, we didn't even have a discussion. He started looking for a new apartment, lease, blah, blah, blah. That's a really good example of how you deal with things like that. And he was looking to move on. He's a very smart guy. He's a different thinker, probably not going to coach. I'm not going to speak for him, but he's a business mind. And, you know, he's not cut from the mold maybe that, you know, some guys that want to go into coaching right away are. So that's a great example of that. And what you do is you go to your lowest peaking phase, because you were at your highest peak. I mean, we were literally, it was March 12th or whatever the date is. So you're literally 3 weeks out of the trials, and you're at your highest peaking phase. You're in short goes, you're in short workouts, you're in match scenarios, you're in practice matches that are timed, and there's referees, and there's there's ambiguity. So 3 guys gather in the middle of the mat during this match and have a fake cube that was thrown or whatever. And people are looking, and did I get the points or did he get the points? And it really doesn't matter, because it comes up to, a 3-person council, and depending on the 3-person council, that's which way it's going to swing. So all that's your highest peaking phase. And then all of a sudden, you're boom, you didn't even compete. You're in your lowest peaking phase. And people want to, I'm going to use a word that's not, it's a belligerent word. They want to screw off when they go from the highest level to the lowest level. And they want to party, and they want to, and you know what? There's that's part of it. You got to have your letdown, but it can't be abuse. And it can't be abuse for days and days and days on end, because then you're sucking your thumb and you're a victim. And victims don't get very far, as we all know, as high level thinkers. But even high level thinkers can get caught into something that isn't healthy because of who they're hanging out with, who they're listening to. They're bored. They're used to maybe having this letdown where they can just kind of go crazy. And because there's no end in sight, maybe this goes longer, and it's damaging. We got to get back on the horse. And so phase 1 in your year, that's where we're at. It's a strength phase, reflection phase, conditioning phase. All these athletes' eating habits are changing. So you can't be on the couch because you're eating more and you're not in the scale. And so you can eat more, and we want you to relax that way. Go have the demons that you like. Go have them, but you got to be active. And because your eating habits are changing, you're putting on weight. You want to put on the right weight, stud and studette, these men and these women that we're coaching. So that's a hard message for some guys.
Mm-hmm.
Our guys have handled it very, very well. They have, and we have a call a week with our team. I'm in contact with our club guys, more kind of like just on the fly, but we have a call with our team every week, and then we're on the phone with them individually, and they're handling it very, very well. And they're sensitive to this COVID-19, and that's important. Let's get rid of this.
Yeah. We're gonna pick your brain on some wrestling topics here, kind of switching it up. But obviously Iowa and you are associated with wanting stalling called, obviously, right? So this has actually become kind of a topic at the high school level and everything else. It's getting confused by a lot of coaches. That the question is basically, one, what is stalling in a wrestling match? And two, as far as for you guys are concerned, is it a push out? Is it changing riding time? Is it just calling stalling more? How do we make folk style wrestling better?
I would say that folk style wrestling, number one, is in pretty good place.
Mm-hmm.
And collegiate, especially when you look at the crowds, 7-minute match, riding time is a pretty good formula. You go to a push out, you shrink the mat. Right now, our mat is big, and that promotes action. If you're not stalling, it doesn't mean that you're score, but it does mean that you're pressing the action. Mm-hmm. If you are avoiding action and repeatedly going to safe places in that circle, that's stalling. And the thing is, the one thing that me and you and all the know-it-alls and all the fans can agree on is what stalling looks like when it's unanimous. And when it's unanimous, you got to call it. And if you go to the edge of the mat and you're not calling it, because say in college we have this, you can't, there's 3 decisions that you got to make when you go off the mat. You got to make a no call, and there was action, and both were going back to the center. You got to make the guy avoided action by pushing the guy out of bounds, stalling on that guy, or the guy intentionally backed out of bounds. You got to call stalling on that guy. I don't agree with that. I agree with me and you and a 10,000 person committee comprised of even casual wrestling fans know what stalling is and call it. And it's gotten to the point where you have to define it. And when you start trying to define things in wrestling, because it is me against you, and when you start to define things in wrestling, I tell you what, it becomes sterile. And the rules committee has tried to do this. And you know what? I said college wrestling's in a really good place. I think international wrestling's in a good place. The higher level you go, it's going to be more even. So maybe the push out is good for international. It's certainly better than the judo rules we had with the ball grab and the clinch and the best 2 out of 3 2-minute periods, because that's not wrestling in my mind. But stalling is what me and you agree together of what it is. So on top, are you seriously laying parallel, or are you really working? On bottom, are you belly surfing and holding points, or are you working to come up? Just because you can't come off the bottom, it doesn't mean you're stalling. Just because you're not turning and scoring on top doesn't mean that you're stalling. So there is ambiguity, and that's okay. There is judgment, but repeatedly going to the edge is stalling, because that's a safe place. And if I back up to set up and I go, that's different. But the funny thing is, in our philosophy as coaches, we are very consistent in how we view wrestling matches. And I don't think everybody is. And what I mean by that is, if our guys repeatedly going to the edge, it ain't happening. We're going to have a very serious conversation. That's not a good strategy. It's making things close. When you try to win close strategic matches, that's when you're vulnerable. And remember this: dominant wrestlers win close matches. When you think of the name Lincoln McIlravy, he's dominant. He's a dominant wrestler. He won a lot of lopsided matches, but he won a lot of close matches, stud. And dominant wrestlers win close matches, and it's because they are pushing the action. So do you have to score to not be stalling? No. You have to be pressing the action, though. And counter wrestling counts.
No.
So disagree with me there if you do, and talk to me because
No,
it is becoming. You're right. It's becoming more of a discussion.
that's something that we've kind of talked about in recent years. I don't know how you feel about it, but we see guys that get hit for counter. They're counter wrestling, they're sprawling, they're stuffing shots, and they're getting called for stalling, even though they're holding the center. They may not be the one shooting. And we're like, is it stalling now to defend? Against these attacks? Like, what is it? So I don't know how you feel, but we felt like we've seen that a lot too, where it's like,
really good point. I like that point, because the bottom line is that if I beat you to the punch and I get my hands locked on your leg, you're not stalling. You're absolutely right. And especially off the whistle stuff, or I'm slapping you on the head and then going. I mean, and you do see that probably more at the high school level. But you're right, and that's not stalling. But the other thing that would help that too is maybe quicker stalemates in these roly-poly type situations that they let go, and it's going to be a stalemate. I think that there can be more like kind of crystal ball refereeing where, hey, we already know this isn't going anywhere. Call a quicker stalemate, because that's where coaches get frustrated too. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you.
That obviously, Iowa fans, but fans in general of wrestling, they kind of enjoy watching you interact with the referee. That's obviously that's a fun thing for fans. But what people may not know is that, so the person who made the connection for us to talk to you was Mike Haggerty, who's an official. So you have different types of relationships as far as you see them as people. But I was going to ask, what is your approach when you're talking to a referee as a coach?
Our approach is, number one, not to be entertaining, but we will fight for our athletes, and we really aren't concerned with the outside public's perception of how we deal with it. We know we can't cross the line. This year in the Penn State match with DeSanto, Terry and I were chirp at that referee, that we thought it was a blatant, joint lock. It wasn't called. It's not a blatant joint lock. Back off, Brands. We got dinged for a team point. Okay, we carried it over the line. So we know that we have a line that we can't cross, and I'll accept that it was the right call, because I was relentless on him during that injury timeout. And it is disrespectful. And plus, where's my focus? My focus needs to be getting my athlete ready to go. My focus needs to be getting, the 41-pounder ready to go, because this guy, it looks like a significant injury. Mm-hmm. And instead, because I've talked about joint locks a lot with Haggerty and Tim Shields, because if we're going to go to MMA, and I'm going to digress a little, I'm going to segue. If we're going to go to MMA, we're going to start teaching in our room. We don't teach it in our room. You know why? Because it's dangerous in our room. Yeah. It hurts our guys wrestling each other that way. And so, maybe we need to spar it more. Maybe we need to slow it down. But we do slow it down from a perspective of protect yourself. But you know what? If we're going MMA and that wasn't, illegal, or we're not going to talk about that even. And then there's a cutback thing, and a guy that did cutbacks that was talked about and actually put into the rules. And then there's the funny finish and the single leg that was. If you're not going to call it, then we got to teach it, because we're bare naked. Okay, so that's one. So that's frustrating for us, because I don't agree with it, and the MMA is more prevalent. So let me answer your question more directly, and I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
But we're not trying to be entertaining, but we will fight for our guys, and it's not as disrespectful as it looks. But we do feel like we get steamrolled if we sit on our hands. If Iowa has a reputation that they badger the refs, and the referees are like, you cross that line, we're going to penalize you. And we're like, oh, now it's not fair because you're not talking to the other locker room like that. You're talking to us, and that's a cheap shot. You know, we're going to defend our guys. We're going to fight for them. And then all of a sudden, we become like church mice, and we're sitting on our hands. We're getting steamrolled, and we're not going to get steamrolled. I think a lot of people exaggerate maybe a lot. I'm not saying that you're exaggerating with this question. It may be entertaining, but it's competitive. And we're not, if you could listen most of the time, we're not disrespectful. And the other thing is I always follow up. It might take a couple months, but I always follow up. And with Haggerty, I followed up immediately. And we've disagreed on some calls before, and I've listened to him. And actually this year in one of our duels, you know, I called him after the duel meeting. It was a night duel, and I was coming home, and it was 11:20, and he answered. And so, you know, what's he doing? Well, he's doing his job, you know, as the coordinator, the Big Ten officials coordinator. And so he answered the phone, and he really helped me. He really helped me on a cradle situation, where in collegiate wrestling, a cradle situation, if you hit that far hip, it's 2. But, you know, for me, it was, there's no reaction time there. And he goes, no, there's reaction time. And we've even, you know, talked about that. And, you know, the referee in question, Angel Rivera, was actually right. And so I was like, okay, you know, and he talked me down. So we can definitely admit we're wrong. And we'll come around. I had a good conversation with Angel Rivera, and Mike Chase was the outside official. And so I had a nice chat with him, and he actually called me because in that particular duel, and I'm kind of telling a story right now. I don't know how entertaining it is, but he said, you know, I've seen you, and I know that your banter with us is more, you know, to get us to listen to you. But this one was different. He said, you kind of laughing because it was the next morning. And he said this one was different because you were hot, and we were hot. Now I think it was the Ohio State duel. Now that I'm kind of telling the story, but you know, that Sasso Lugo match. I mean, they had like 8 calls go their way, and when I say 8, it was probably 2. But, and so anyway, so there's a lot of background there, maybe a personal story. We are going to fight for our guys. We are not as belligerent as it looks. I love the officials. I do. And they're important because we got to pay them more. You know, they are in a tough job, and they're on national TV too.
Yeah.
You know, coaches, you know, you're on national TV, your program's on national TV, the individual wrestlers are on national TV, but those officials are on national TV a lot more than they've used to be with the Big Ten Network, and then all the streaming, and how Flow has their own TV channel. Now it's not even an online thing anymore. It's television and track wrestling. And so we got to take care of our officials, and we do. I wished them all happy Easter. How's that?
That was very good politically for you. That's good. Yeah. So reflecting on your own coaching here, what do you think, let's just say over the last 10 or 15 years, what have you changed in your own coaching the most, you think, in your approach or whatever?
For me, it's, I know that you need people in your program that are united. And you know what, it was kind of like there'd be some like you know, like this happened. You see my hands, they're going like this, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's okay, we're gonna let it go. You just can't, because it breeds competing philosophies, and everybody has to be on the same page. And I'll tell you something, when you go to work in the morning and you know that you're going to have a pleasant day because of the people you're around, it is way better. And you could have a staff, say, of 7, and 4 coaches, strength coach, athletic trainer, senior administrator, 4th floor, and director of ops or whatever. And you could have 6 out of those 7 in harmony, but one person can wreck a day. And especially because it's over and over and over. And it's one of those things where I have no patience for it. not patience where you're not listening. So as a leadership, if I was going to write a chapter on this in a leadership book, it wouldn't be, I have no patience, cut it off at the root, or cut it off when it happens. I'm not saying that. Have open-minded discussions. Don't embarrass them. Bring them behind closed doors. If it happens repeatedly, bring in a witness. Continue to talk to them and let them know, and then get more stern. Hey, this is not going to fly. This is not going to fly. We are going to be on the same page here. And, we have options here. So talk to me. What aren't you understanding? And those types of conversations. And because of that, I don't make the mistake of having, one-on-one conversations. And even I don't make the mistake of having group conversations where maybe there's a group that, that I'm not in line with. I will always have a coach in there that's a witness or a senior administrator, or sometimes if it gets too heated, I'll just walk into the administrator's office, say, hey, you got to handle this, and just hand the baton to them. Because we are in a world where, as you guys know, that the athletes have all the power. And we love that. We love that. We love that Spencer Lee and Marinelli and Cameron DeSalvo, Cassiope, Caleb Young, and Mirren, and Happel, and Lugo, and Assad, and Nelson Brands, and all these guys. We love it that they have all the power. But we got to all be aligned. And so I sense things, and I will hit them quicker. I don't let it fester. That's what I've learned.
So is there any one thing that sticks out to you that you've done over the course of your coaching? There's like, all right, that was definitely a mistake that I'm not going to make again, whether it be technical or philosophy, whatever.
I think I'm giving not myself credit, I'm giving our staff credit, but I think we're pretty sharp in the corner, and we've been pretty sharp. I look back at my career as a head coach. I had Wes Hand and Doug Schwab at Virginia Tech. I mean, those are two sharp coaches. They both came back to Iowa with me, and then we hired Terry. He's pretty sharp. And then we ended up with the staff of Morningstar and Telford and Terry. And Telford finished his second year, and he is sharp. He is solid. So we don't make many judgment errors because we are in harmony. So I don't have many regrets. I have one regret in the corner with the match in the Nationals. I'm not going to, well, I mean, maybe I would. Mike Evans and Chris Perry. And I know that if we go both up in that match, we win that match. And we didn't. And I wasn't forceful enough in the corner. And I let Mike Evans make that call, and he went down, and Mike Evans tried to run the clock out a little bit instead of exploding and chain wrestling and coming off the bottom. And then all of a sudden there was a riding time point that came in, and then it went to overtime. And if we would have went neutral, I mean, the only way that Chris Perry scored on us is in a scramble off our shot. He couldn't get to our legs, and I needed to be more forceful. So that's a very clear mistake where if it's both up, doggone it, it's both up. And maybe you've even, if you really watch our team and you're a fan, you've seen some situations there where we're going both up. And so that's one thing. The biggest thing where I've made mistakes is when I have one-on-one conversations and I have no idea. I'm thinking that this is going to be like a conversation where this is constructive criticism, and this athlete automatically knows that that's what it is. And so it's really for his own good. We're not going to waste any time here. So we're going to get into it. We're going to cut to the chase, and it's one-on-one. And then they leave, and you find out that, first of all, they're probably not, doing what they should be doing anyway. That's why you're having the conversation. So they can take that and they can run with it, whether they go to their parents, whether they go to their administration, or whether they go to whatever. And so now it's parental and athlete conversation. And there's always another coach. And if it's bad enough, then there's an administrator, because the he said, she said scenario, you ain't winning that as a coach anymore, fellas. Whoever's listening, you're not winning that anymore. You have to protect yourself with witnesses.
This is kind of a different, just get your take on this. So you coach at Iowa. Obviously, you guys have, elite people wanting to come there, elite wrestlers. but put yourself in a situation of like coaching, maybe if you're coaching a program from complete scratch, how would you approach coaching someone, maybe if they weren't elite, or if you were starting a program and had wrestlers that were not elite, where would you start? What would be the most important things you would hit with them?
For me personally, it would be knowing my weakness, and I love to be on my feet. And I think, Spencer Lee's type of domination is so lopsided that that's how you dominate. But for me, I was a takedown, let him up guy. And so, I can already go there in my mind when you say someone that you're starting from the base. And I would spend a lot of time on my feet, and I would spend a lot of time on my feet. I would spend a lot of time on my feet, and that's not it. Balance it. Get them off the bottom. Spend time talking to them about do they have any pets? What are their names? Do you like fish? Do you like dogs? Do you like cats? And then spend time on top. Spend time on the bottom, chain wrestling, and spend time on some things that are fun in the sport instead of just hammering. And I'm not saying the fundamentals aren't important, but for me, it'd be like hammering the head outside single finish, hammering the single leg finish, hammering the front headlock over and over and over again. And for a third grader or a first grader or a 7-year-old kid, you got to be broad based, and you need to teach top wrestling, and you need to teach a scramble, and you need to show examples on video and not just examples that serve your purpose. I think that's really, really important, and I have to do that in my own room with elite guys, because it's the same thing. I mean, if you can't get off the bottom, you're in trouble, And so you got to throw your legs back. You got to have offense. You got to be able to finish when you're in. You got to be able to finish when you're extended. But you also got to be able to keep a guy down when you go ahead with 40 seconds to go and you're up by 1. You got to be able to keep him down. It's not just cut him and then now it's even again. And, win that match in that position. So, I think exposing them to as many different positions as possible, whether that's with different, youth coaches or even video, and then conversation. Get to know them.
Yeah.
I watched Sam Henson run his club, and, he runs his club. He knows those kids. I see him. He's talking to a group, and he's up their butt, and then he'll go to another group, and he's joking with them, but he's getting them. They're all serious about wrestling. But that's a good. I think that surprised me a little bit, because he's got a reputation for being a guy, and he's my kind of guy, But I watched him and how he deals with I'm not even talking about different level of athletes. This was a pretty good room that I was watching, and how he handled, you could tell the different mentalities and how they responded. And then they were all eager. There was no roll in the eyes. There was no body talk, body language sass. There was complete respect because of the individuality. And in Iowa, our individuals are the most important barometer in what's best for our program. We'll do what's best for the individual before we do what's best for our program any day. And that's been consistent.
Well, we just got a few more questions, quick hitters for you, and then we'll let you go. But this is more just like a wrestling nerd question, but who are your favorite wrestlers to watch that are not Iowa guys?
I just had this quiz that Iowa, because there's so much downtime, they want our coaches, whatever. And they did a little thing with Terry and I where there's a quiz and there were 2 answers, and you had to pick an answer, which one suited you the most. And then at the end of the 7 or 8 questions, you'd be aligned with either Tom or Terry. And it was kind of funny. And one of the questions was, who's your favorite wrestler? And my answer was Arsen Fadzayev. He's not Iowa. He's a Ruski. And he wrestled in a lot of different positions, and he was good. And when I say a lot of different positions, it was 3 or 4, but he was a master in all of them. And it's a really good lesson of he could front headlock and choke. He could front headlock and run around behind you, go behind. He could get in deep on on a head outside single and finish. He could get in deep on a head inside single and finish. He could reshot. He could turn like a mofo. And I don't even know if you could get on top of him enough to even try to turn him. And he was mean. And there's a match with him against an American. That's one of my favorite matches to watch, where the American was out there and, you know, it got kind of chippy and the American kind of gave him one on the head, and he just stood back and he went, whomp! And that changed the match. And it was a close match, but after he whomped him, that was a really good lesson for me when I was young, that if somebody tried, because of your reputation, you know, you have a reputation of being tough on the mat, and they try to give it to you, you don't let that go. You don't let that go. And intimidation, there is no room for intimidation on that mat. The only intimidation is if your opponent's intimidating. You know what? That's their problem. So there's kind of some.
Do you have an American wrestler who's one of your favorites to watch?
You got to say John W. Smith. He beat me 14-4 in a match, and I'll never forget it. He whooped my tail. That's before there was a 10-point tech fall. So, you know, yeah, it was a lesson. It was a lesson. Great respect for him.
Who is? Does anyone pop to mind? But who's the best Iowa wrestler that you've ever coached that maybe people don't know because they never got in the starting lineup? Who is the best guy you've ever coached who maybe was an incredible practice room guy, never made the starting lineup?
We have several guys right now that were good enough to wrestle other places. Jaron Glosser is going to graduate. Paul Glenn was in the lineup. Vince Turk was in the lineup 3 years ago, and then they're not in the lineup this year. So I remember those three right off the top of my head because of how they handled the situation. Glosser was nicked up. He didn't get the wrestle-off opportunity this year. I know he's confident. He is not, you know, one of these guys that was a victim, but he's one of these guys that supported us all the way to the end. He went to the Big Ten championships. He was a drilling partner. And he's a very popular drilling partner. And so we had, you know, 3 or 4 guys using him. So Kemmer would use him, Marinelli would use him, you know, Young would use him, or whoever. And it was, you know, he was doing triple duty. So those are the guys that mean the most in your program, is when they don't or aren't in the role that they want to be in, are they still engaged, moving themselves forward and helping their teammates. And Paul Glenn and Jaron Glosser are at the top of the list for me just recently. Looking back over my career, you know, there's guys that were in and out of the lineup, you know, that helped win some big dual meets. You know, Lofthouse ended up being in the lineup, but in 2010, I think Chad Beatty got hurt and he had to step in. And, you know, that was significant for Lofthouse, and it really moved him ahead for the next 2 years he was in the lineup. He was an All-American as senior. Not saying that he wouldn't have been an All-American, but he took that opportunity and grew. And then the next year, my timelines get hazy now looking back that far, but that's an example where he used that time to make him better, and it paid off. It paid off down the road. But you know, we got some really smart guys that have gone through this program and have won tournaments, have graduated, and have gone on to be very successful in life. And they didn't get what they wanted on the mat, and they're still engaged with the program, and they're not bitter. And that's saying a lot, because this is a very personal sport. When you don't get what you want, a lot of times, sometimes you leave places bitter. But we got some great ambassadors out there that wrestled for us that didn't, you know, hit the lineup. I got a guy named Jake Cadle that graduated a couple years ago, and he's in grad school right now. But he is so funny. He's hilarious. I mean, he'll send you texts and, you know, what do you call when you take a picture of somebody and then you add to it? What do you call it?
Memes? GIFs?
Yeah, whatever. And it's just hilarious. And it's smart. He's funny. He's engaged in our program. He's still a fan. And, you know, he didn't agree with how I handled his weight class situation. And he sat me down, you know, 3/4 of the year through the year and told me he wasn't happy. And I appreciated that. I didn't necessarily go his way, but, you know, we have a strong relationship because of that now. So there's a lot of guys.
So for you,
you know what?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's 10 weight classes.
So for you personally, this is a question we've been asking a lot of people. And by the way, Cody Brewer said Daniel Dennis was the answer. But for you personally, who's your least favorite person to wrestle, either in practice or in a match, for whatever reason?
Well, John Smith whooped me. We talked about that. So let's throw another name out there. Lincoln McElravy was a handful. And he came to camp at the University of Iowa when he was a junior in high school. I was let's see, I'm going to get this right here, because his junior year. So he was going into his senior year. So I'm going into that's after my junior year. I won 2 national titles and was 3rd in the U.S. Open that year. It was dead even. And if I'm really, really honest to the folks, he got the best of me. And he was a handful from day one. And we had some great workouts. And when I say some, it was great. He was my go-to. He was my go-to when it was Katie bar the door. And when you would get in on a leg and you finish, it made you better, and it meant something because he fought everything. It was like wrestling Terry, except for he was different. Scramble was different. His feel was different. His funk was different. His hips were different. His body was different. He was bigger. You know, Terry was a 26-pounder. McElravy was a 42, 50-pounder. So
there we go.
yeah, so Lincoln McElravy.
Anyway, we'll let you go here in a second. Jesse, you wanna ask the last question we typically ask everybody?
Yeah, I think we just have kind of ended like a fun one, but do you have any like weird or interesting wrestling story? I'm froze now. Go ahead, James.
Okay, say it again. One more time.
We've just asked everybody if they have like a weird or interesting wrestling story, something that happened during a match, a practice, a workout, or just any interesting story that's happened along your career that like sticks out to you. It's like, oh yeah, that was kind of a moment right there. That was a little different.
I remember in a practice room situation where a very good high-level competitor that I'm very fond of, he's still in our room. He's on our Hawkeye Wrestling Club roster. Bottom work, struggling on the bottom, and he was wrestling a club guy, but he was a young college kid. And Nathan Birak's brother would pick him up. And this guy would keep coming up. He kept fighting. But after the 4th or 5th time, he goes, golly, that hurts. But he didn't.
All right. Coach, since we're starting to get some interference with the technology, we'll cut it off. But I just really want to say thank you very much for talking to us.
Yeah, thanks, Coach.
That's awesome. You're the man.
You guys are great. We love it. We love you. We love our Hawk fans. We love Haggerty. He's doing a great job. And thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter, Coach.
Happy Easter to you too, Coach.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.